And so this is a company that doesn't give a damn about the American people. All it cares about is creating profit for shareholders. But again, this is a company that's so powerful, and its connections to the U.S. government and U.S. government fiscal policy are so intertwined that you're going to see BlackRock involved in the next crisis to come, regardless of whether Kamala wins or Trump wins.
According to recent research conducted by River, a US-based Bitcoin-focused financial services company, there has been an impressive rise in corporate adoption of Bitcoin, with enterprises holding 68,333 Bitcoin as of August 2024, representing 3.3% of the total Bitcoin supply. This represents a 587 gain from 2020. However, investigative journalist Whitney Webb warns that the growing dominance of corporate giants like BlackRock poses a serious threat to economic policy. According to Whitney Webb, this can lead to wealth transfer from ordinary Americans to the wealthy and environmental tokenization. In a recent interview with podcaster Sab's Whitney lambasted politicians such as Trump and Kamala for supporting the billionaire class, emphasizing the importance of policy over emotion and raising concerns about the economic consequences of corporate ownership. According to Whitney Webb, BlackRock's principal interest is producing profits for shareholders rather than for the American people. She also emphasizes the firm's role in creating fiscal policy, particularly in developing solutions to economic crisis. Whitney believes BlackRock's impact on financial policy.
Yeah, so I mean, Kamala is very clearly part of the same DNC crowd that includes Biden, includes Obama, includes the Clintons. These kind of Democrat politicians who frame themselves in terms of rhetoric as progressive, but in actuality, when you look at their policies, at best, they're center right. And so it's really no surprise that she would have BlackRock so intimately involved in developing her economic policy, because as I mentioned earlier, BlackRock is really a bipartisan economic advisor. So for example, Larry Fink used to manage Trump's personal fortune, and he was tapped specifically by Trump in the lead up to COVID to help develop the government's fiscal response to COVID. But really, it wasn't a fiscal response to COVID so much as a fiscal response to the U.S. government's lockdown policy, or rather the lockdown policies that were implemented in states but tacitly supported at the federal level. And again, in 2008, they helped organize the bailouts, which of course didn't really benefit Main Street. They benefited Wall Street. And the same was also true with the COVID policy and this whole idea of the going direct reset, which again is based on the research of John Titus, who published an article about going direct on the Solari report, which is Catherine Austin Fitz's website. And for anyone interested in what is arguably the biggest wealth transfer from regular Americans to the oligarch class in American history, I would really encourage you to go and read his investigation. It's very eye-opening. So essentially what happened with going direct is that, previously there was this policy of quantitative easing, or rather, wanton money printing after the 2008 economic crisis that was going on, in the U.S. Federal Reserve System. And so BlackRock created this plan at the end of 2019 for the next crisis, that in the next crisis, the Federal Reserve should consider going direct. And so what that meant is that they would do the same money printing they did before, but instead of giving it to public sector entities, they would put it directly in the hands of Wall Street, like BlackRock. And then when the next downturn started, not necessarily when COVID started, but it actually started not long after a month really after BlackRock made that proposal. The repo market in the US started to go totally haywire, and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York started to intervene in that market and implement BlackRock's going direct policy. That continued from then all the way up until COVID was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization. And then they just went into complete overdrive, printing all of this money and handing out to Wall Street. And then the BlackRock heavy involvement in what became the government's COVID fiscal policy, overseen by people like Mnuchin, for example, they were put in charge of a lot of these funding facilities that the federal government set up, supposedly to bail out Main Street from the lockdown policies. And instead of BlackRock using that money to help regular Americans, they bought shares in their own ETFs, and nothing happened. Nothing happened at all. And so this is a company that doesn't give a damn about the American people. All it cares about is creating profit for shareholders and the people whose money it manages, creating, greater profits for them, which in the past included Donald Trump himself and a lot of other, major oligarch figures that back Republicans, and they also back Democrats. Larry Fink himself, I think, is pretty overtly a Democrat supporter. But again, this is a company that's so powerful, and its connections to the U.S. government and U.S. government fiscal policy are so intertwined that you're going to see BlackRock involved in the next crisis to come, regardless of whether Kamala wins or Trump wins. Because when Trump won, he called Larry Fink up and was like, Larry, develop a policy that, the government was actually already implementing before them, but just gave him free rein to go even crazier and steal all of our, hyperinflate the dollar and destroy regular Americans' purchasing power, and then give all this extra money that was printed directly in the hands of BlackRock. And so, a lot of the people now that blame all of the inflation on Biden, it was really Trump began that policy, but because of all the BlackRock people in the Biden administration, it was continued until, the COVID fiscal response changed and they decided that COVID was over. And, the BlackRock stuff is going to continue, like I said, regardless of who wins.
Webb illustrates how BlackRock is pioneering the tokenization of real-world assets, thus converting nature into a digital commodity. The initiative packaged as sustainable development would create a new asset class for Wall Street and strengthen the financial elite's position. She argues that other powerful organizations such as the Carlyle Group, which has ties to the CIA, also operate in this arena. Whitney Webb adds that both parties benefit the wealthy elite regardless of political rhetoric. Trump's policies, such as not reinstating Glass-Steagall, reflect his support for Wall Street interests. She contends that Americans have developed amnesia concerning individuals, empowers policy activities, and should focus on their track records rather than campaign promises. This lack of examination enables politicians to maintain a populist image while serving the interests of the elites. Let's return to the interview to gain more insight from Whitney Webb.
I think it's very unfortunate, but it's very telling. And it's also important to point out that BlackRock is trailblazing this whole idea of tokenizing real world assets. So basically, they're trying to make new forms of digital gold, kind of like, I guess, like Bitcoin's been called that, for example, but they're trying to basically tokenize major aspects of the natural world, which they say are like, this rainforest, this national park is of a finite supply, it's of a finite size. So we can tokenize each hectare or each acre of that and link it to like a token or something and trade it on the blockchain and make all of this money. I mean, that's basically, they're about to turn nature into a giant Wall Street casino, and it's going to be supported by Kamala or Trump because they framed it as, sustainable development. And this is going to stop climate change, but it's not. It's going to create an entire new asset class for Wall Street and allow their insane casino to keep going for the next 100 years plus. Other groups that are in that same world of finance that are just as influential as BlackRock, like the Carlyle Group, and they have like very overt ties to the CIA. And no one talks about them either. And they own a bunch of this stuff, and Blackstone too. And you'll have a lot of these Wall Street guys and hedge fund guys. There's a bunch backing Trump, and there's a bunch backing Kamala. There's a bunch of Silicon oligarchs backing Trump, and there's a bunch backing Kamala. But ultimately, they agree, like I said earlier, on a lot of the same Orwellian and horrible policy choices that regular Americans are tired of, and we're being sort of divided and conquered by focusing on a lot of these rhetorical differences. And people have essentially developed amnesia, I guess you could say, about what these people did when they were in power and in office. What were their policy actions? So I think people should focus on what their policies have been when they've been in power, and not so much on the rhetoric. Because, I mean, we know that with Trump, and we know that with Kamala too. So another example with Trump is that he campaigned he was going to reinstate Glass-Steagall, which is the repeal of that happened during the Clinton administration, a Democrat, and largely created the 2008 economic crisis. And he claimed he was going to reinstate it. And then he gets in office and has all these a Goldman Sachs guy becomes his treasury secretary and all of this stuff. And it was Goldman Sachs guy, Robert Rubin, who repealed Glass-Steagall, and Glass-Steagall doesn't get reinstated. And instead, the banking industry gets even more deregulated under Trump. And that tends to be what happens more or less often with Democrats as well. Wall Street essentially always gets what it wants. And this particular faction of the Democrats, the Obama, Biden, Kamala crowd, and the Clintons, of course, are very, very, very cozy with Wall Street and have been historically. And the same is true for Trump, who was actually bailed out in the 1990s by Wall Street. And I believe it was actually Rothschild Inc. specifically, and the banker there that helped to bail him out, Wilbur Ross. Trump later made his commerce secretary. And when he was being bailed out, the head of that particular bank said that, we could have let Trump fail, like it wasn't really in our interest to bail him out, but the Trump name is still an asset. So that's why we bailed him out. Like he's still useful because of the Trump name. So, I would argue that really both parties are always going to serve the billionaire class. And there's been a major effort to frame Trump as sort of a populist hero. And in order to do that this time around, there has to be a lot of amnesia about what he actually did when he was in office. And, most Americans have had 4 years to forget about everything he did. And now you have people that are sort of apologizing for stuff he did or saying he didn't do stuff he actually did in a way that reminds me a lot of how liberals were during Obama's re-election campaign in 2012, acting like the only reason, Obama didn't keep any of his campaign promises at all was because, it was these guys or this person or, the other party and all of that. And a lot of those same excuses are being rolled out for Trump right now. But you can't say that Trump is so amazing that he's going to destroy the deep state single-handedly and then say that he did all this bad stuff last time around because he couldn't control or rein in any of his executive appointees or cabinet officials. You can't have it both ways, unfortunately.
Whitney Webb, an investigative journalist, shows the frightening close relationships between politicians and BlackRock, a giant financial institution with enormous influence over economic policy. BlackRock's going direct strategy includes raising funds and sending them directly to financial institutions, bypassing Main Street and resulting in a massive wealth transfer from ordinary Americans to the wealthy elite. Meanwhile, River's recent data reveals a huge increase in corporate interest in Bitcoin MicroStrategy, and Tether led the way, accounting for 85% of corporate Bitcoin acquisitions in the first half 2024. The study also found a 40% increase in publicly traded corporations holding Bitcoin between September 2023 and August 2024. This trend will likely continue with daily growth in corporation Bitcoin holdings, ranging from 204 to 519 Bitcoin by 2026, cementing corporate influence in the financial environment. Real Bitcoin is classified as a commodity, whereas ETFs are regulated as securities, which may result in considerable fees and reporting obligations for enterprises. River's insights stem from its expanding client base, which has experienced a 68% growth in the number of companies handled since August 2023. Surprisingly, 70% of these businesses have never sold any Bitcoin after purchasing it, viewing it as a long-term investment despite initial concerns about accounting and tax implications. 95% of questioned clients intend to increase their Bitcoin holdings, citing the possibility to hedge against inflation and diversify treasuries. The research includes successful case studies of businesses using Bitcoin in their operations, demonstrating its rising significance in corporate treasuries. River's findings show a considerable desire among firms to use Bitcoin in their financial operations. Like and subscribe to bring good luck and blessings for your financial future and get this crypto bull run going.